It sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead. Treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Dealer.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
Otherwise, all of our friends are like at least mid-20s to 30s. It's just not going to happen. This isn't middle school. I'm not going to sleep on an air mattress. I slept on an air mattress when I was over at Caleb's house a couple months ago in Kansas, and it was freezing that night, and it was the worst sleep I had, and I didn't recover for like 3 days.
So I will say I enjoy an air mattress. Because I like a firm mattress. I can't sleep on a soft mattress. I'm weird like that.
That's the thing. It starts firm, and by the time you wake up the next morning, it's completely... It doesn't matter. It could be a brand new mattress. It happens every time.
I've slept on an air mattress recently or whatever.
I'm probably bigger than you, and that maybe has something to do with it.
Not much. And if it's an air mattress that doesn't have a leak, it shouldn't deflate by the morning or whatever. It stays pretty firm. So I don't know if you just got a bum air mattress or what, but...
She said. Anyway, I'm never going to do it again. And also, it's cold. It's cold. If the room is cold, then you're sleeping on a balloon full of cold air, and then you're just cold the whole...
I will say that you're right, and that is one of the things of air mattresses that you have to learn from, is that if you just put regular fitted sheets on them, you're done. But if you put a sleeping bag underneath there first, right, where it's like that nice fluffy material that's insulated, then it's nice and cozy. So you gotta find.
I really
zone.
like the sleep mats that I slept on when I was in Japan.
I've looked into them.
They're very nice if you like a firm. Like sometimes I'll like to sleep on the floor like one night out of like a month, just so like everything gets kind of realigned.
Sure.
I'm sure that's not real science, but that's how it feels. I love the futon, sort of, not like the futon as in like the American futon, which is like a couch or something like that, where like you can feel the chain link fence of the mattress, as you lay down, but like an actual mat that is laid on like tatami and you fall asleep on. That was actually pretty nice.
Yeah.
It was a good realignment because it was the last night we slept in a Western bed every day for like 9 out of the 10 days that we were there. Last night before we left for the US, we were like, let's find the most Japanese looking, even if it's cheesy, the most Japanese looking hotel and sleep in a Japanese room on tatami. And we did, and it was a good realignment before we went on like another 9-hour flight that day. So
fair enough. Well, hey everyone, welcome to The Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, with me is Akiva Miola.
Hello.
And we're about to get started onto our brand new series here, but before we do, a couple little shout outs to give, or really not shout outs, but just, announcements, bullet points to kind of share. First and foremost is if anybody is enjoying the show, we would humbly ask that you check out our Patreon. That's just going to be patreon.com/thebiographers. As of now, we're doing this for free.
Yeah.
So if anybody's able to support us, we'd appreciate it.
I did the counting. Da Vinci was 143 pages long.
Double spaced.
Double spaced. I'm talking MLA format, 12-point double spaced, 140 pages long. So if you feel like An 140-page long, in-depth dive about one of the greatest minds in the world was worth a couple dollars. Maybe consider going with the Patreon.
Yeah, you make me feel insecure when you say that, because I'll write a series and it'll be like 60 pages, and I'll be like, how are you at 140?
Well, that's because you go by like novel standard,
I
and
write
I go by
single-spaced.
MLA because,
Because you're cool like that?
because I'm a nerd. I'm like, it has to be 12 point. Times New Roman.
Did want to give a quick little shout out and thank you to my sister-in-law's mom, Donna. Donna, you listen to the show, so you're probably going to hear this. Just want to first of all tell you, I love you. You're great. You're wonderful. The other day, out of nowhere, just because she's been listening to the show and she likes the show and has learned a lot from it, she just sent me some money over Venmo. And it was very, very generous. And I just wanted to say thank you. So, Donna,
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you very much. It's very, very sweet of you. And I promise we will put it into endeavors for the show. Like I'm already thinking of like, how can I use this for marketing efforts and promoting efforts and stuff? So thank you. It really does mean a lot. Next item, though, is we are going to be starting a Kickstarter very soon. I think really within the next week or so, we're going to be launching it. So if anybody is able to support us there, again, that's really just going to go towards marketing efforts to potentially turn this into full-time careers for both Akiva and I. That is going to be kickstarter.com/profile/thebiographers. And that one, again, it will actually have tiers to it, to where we have incentives. Right now, Patreon is really just, thank you, here's some money. The Kickstarter will actually have things. So we have things like stickers we're going to be doing and posters potentially and hats. And that is obviously if we meet our fundraising goal. Kickstarter is all or nothing. So if we don't get our goal, then nobody gets anything. So, and you get a refund as well. So don't feel bad. But anyway, just wanted to put that out
Yeah, you can almost use it like a savings account if you think we'll fail. Right? You could just put in a bunch of money in the Kickstarter, and then you'd be like, Daniel and Akiva are never going to make it. And then you'll get all your money back later.
So what you're saying is moral of the story is everybody should just put in like $1,000.
Yeah, just put in like $1,000.
There you go.
You'll probably get it back.
Probably.
We're gonna, probably.
It's very deceitful. It's not the case.
No,
Please
no.
don't just do that, everybody. But anyway, if you are able to support us, we would really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, buddy, you ready to go?
Let's rock and roll.
All right, I am super, super excited. So, for our 6th series, we're headed in a more musical direction with a surprisingly oft-forgotten character in the world of classical composition and piano performance. Now, I know that classical music might not sound that exciting to a lot of you, but I promise that the story I'm about to tell you would rival any modern-day rock star or rock group, with the possible exception of Motley Crue.
I mean, hell, you guys liked Da Vinci. You thought there was going to be some stuffy painter, and you guys loved his story, so.
And for all my musicians and music lovers out there, this series is for you. Now, such was the infamous nature of our next character that in 1975, the lead singer of The Who, Roger Daltrey, known for his showmanship on stage and balls-to-the-wall rock star persona, would be selected to portray our next subject in an insanely over-the-top, hyper-fantasized film called Listomania. In fact, the term Listomania, which many of you might know only from the 2009 song by French rock band Phoenix, was actually coined in the mid-1800s to describe the absolute hysteria that followed our next subject basically everywhere he went. Not only was he known for his mind-blowing ability to play the piano, but was also a significant contributor to pop music as we know it, helping to innovate concepts like the symphonic poem, the idea of impressionism in music, and what it meant to go to a concert. When you think of a rock star, you probably think of the phrase sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and our next subject practically invented that persona. Though he lived the life of a full-blown rock star, he was constantly fighting his own conscience, which was deeply connected to his Catholic upbringing, and he would eventually become an abbot, reporting directly to the Pope himself.
What?
You might not know his name like you know Beethoven, Chopin, Debussy, or Mozart, but he had connections to all of them. For this next series, we'll be entering the world of a true superstar of his day in Hungarian composer Franz Liszt.
I'm so excited. In an abbot, what?
Yeah, dude. Well, that's a good while down in his life, but we will eventually get
complete left turn based on what I've already heard just through osmosis from working together.
But we'll find out as we go through this series. It was this constant riding back and forth of like, he was a certain thing, but he kind of had this like underlying Catholic guilt throughout all of his life that compelled him to go towards being part of the church. But we'll get into that, I promise. Now, before we begin, like always, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the primary sources used in this series. First is a book called Franz Liszt, Musician, Celebrity, Superstar, by author Oliver Hilms. And I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Hilms. It might be Hilm. It might be S is silent, but I'm not 100% sure. Now, Oliver Hilms is a German author who has completed other biographical works on classical composers like Alma Mahler, König Ludwig II, and even Franz Liszt's own daughter, Cosima, who we will be discussing a good deal throughout this series.
One word like Madonna. Cosima.
well, we'll get there. Cosima was her own thing. Now, all of Oliver Hilms' writing is originally in German, so it had to be translated into English. But I do have to say, on a personal level, I love the succinct, matter-of-fact way that Hilms writes and organizes his writing, as it paints a perfect timeline of Franz Liszt's life. I also sourced information from a book called Franz Liszt, A Guide to Research by Michael Saffel, as well as a book of collected letters called Letters of Franz Liszt by Ida Marie Lupsius, who goes under the alias of Lamara. You can find a complete list of all the sources I used for this series, including the books, on our website, thebiographerspodcast.com. I will also say, and this is a little bit more off the cuff, I have referenced a lot of other collections of letters and essays by Franz Liszt. I think they're called the complete works of Franz Liszt, but anyhow, just wanted to throw that out there too, because that has been a part of a lot of the quotes that I've been able to find through this series too. So without further ado, let's get into the life of Franz Liszt.
I'm so excited. Let's go.
Now, Franz Liszt was born on October 22nd, 1811, to Adam and Anna Liszt in a small town in Hungary called Rating, which is now part of Austria. The location of Rating is kind of important, as there was a lot of turmoil in the region throughout the centuries, which meant various powers controlled the area at different times. Though Franz himself and his parents all identified as Hungarian, not a single one of them spoke Hungarian, but rather German. This would eventually lead to Franz developing something of an identity crisis for the entirety of his life, as he would forever feel disconnected from his own people, unable to communicate in what should have been his native tongue. Franz's mother, Anna, came from a small town a few miles north of Rating and was the 9th child from her father's second marriage. Anna was just 22 years old when she met Adam Liszt and became pregnant, seemingly, on her wedding night. A few months into her pregnancy, the town of Rating was visited by a band of gypsies who, according to legend, prophetically predicted that a quote-unquote great man would be born unto the village soon, and Anna took this as a sign from God.
Whoa.
Franz's father, Adam Liszt, who was 12 years older than his wife Anna, was employed as a bookkeeper under Prince Nicholas II of Hungary, which meant the family was able to live in relative luxury compared to most at the time. Though Adam was a bookkeeper by trade, his true passion was in music, and as a young man had studied piano, violin, cello, guitar, and musical composition.
Wow.
Early in his career, Adam tried to make it as a professional musician while still working as a bookkeeper, and did some work with the court orchestra in Eisenstadt. And there are some German names in here that I will try my best to pronounce. But was ultimately transferred to the little town of Rating, where he met Anna. But Adam's love for music never died. And after little Franz was born, he grew up in a house that was constantly filled with music, as Adam took every chance he could get to play his violin or his guitar. Adam and Anna would have only one child, Franz, whose Latin name from baptism was Franciscus, though even Franz never used that name. Now, throughout his childhood, Franz was sickly and often in poor health. He was apparently so sick at one point that his parents even ordered a child-sized coffin to bury their son in, but were surprised and relieved when he made a full recovery.
It's like the meme where it's, you know, the guy who goes to get the bar exam and there's like 2 cakes and it's like, who wants to be a lawyer anyway? And then the other one's like, congratulations. You know? And they just give the cake based on what happened.
I know, it was a preemptive coffin, but they didn't need it.
They got like a baby rattle and then also a coffin just based on how that's going to go.
I think that was probably for a lot of human history. That's how it was. It was like, you're pregnant? Let's order both.
Don't want to wait on shipping there. You get stinky.
Now, despite his sickly nature, Franz was a very sweet, kind, friendly, and charming kid. Everyone in town knew him, and he seemed to know everyone as well. He was known to happily skip around the village and say hello to everyone he encountered. He had that rare, effortless gift of charisma that instantly drew people to him. Franz was also a very cute kid. He was one of those kids that you would look at and just go, yeah, you're going to be one of the beautiful people.
It's just, I'm picturing like a Sound of Music, like little la-di-da-di-da, wearing like lederhosen or some shit.
I mean, I don't think you're that far off the mark. Like, now.
Oh my God, a beautiful day.
Yeah, now, like where he's living now was now a part of Austria.
Yeah.
So like, it's very, very possible that he was yodeling his way down the street. Now, we'll get there later in our story, but just know as we move along here, Franz Liszt was a lady killer, okay? Now, Franz did his best to attend school in his childhood, but given that the single-room schoolhouse often exceeded 60 children, things were just too chaotic for Franz to absorb much information, and he often played hooky, something he regretted for all of his life as he never learned geography, history, or his own native language of Hungarian. But that being said, he did eventually learn to speak Italian, French, and even English, with French being his favorite. And remember, he's also a native German speaker.
I see.
Yeah, he's basically able to speak 4 different languages by the end of his life.
Polyglot. Interesting.
Now, outside of his not so formal education, Franz started to learn to play the piano from his music-loving father probably around the age of 4, if not earlier. His father was a true music lover, and rather than pushing Franz to train in a formal, stuffy way, which was common for the time, Adam encouraged Franz to improvise on the piano and follow what his ears and his heart were telling him. Being of steadfast Catholic faith, Franz's parents devoutly took him to the church services every Sunday, and it was here that Franz began to develop a love for chamber music, in addition to his lifelong devotion to the Catholic Church. Rounding out his musical tastes, Franz was also enthralled by the band of traveling gypsies that would often pass through town and put on concerts for the village. The music of the gypsies was possibly the most influential on young Franz, as it was completely different to what he was normally exposed to, ranging from the most upbeat and danceable tunes to songs of deep melancholy and remorse.
Yeah.
So it was like music of the people, right? Rather than just like, like in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
It was like he kind of was learning what pop music was in a weird way. And it was from these gypsy musicians.
It makes sense, too. Like we were just talking about in the last episode, but like growing up Jewish, there was also sort of a kindred sort of spirit to like Romani people. And as much as a lot of European history kind of has a very negative association with like Gypsy or Romani or however you choose to denominate the group, they were the entertainment of the time. Totally. It served a very important purpose for a lot of these places.
A lot of the arts, let's say, dancing, music, singing, performances.
In the same way that vaudeville and Jewish acting would become Hollywood in, the early 1900s, Romani and, Gypsy culture would become entertainment for places like Hungary. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Adam Liszt was so passionate about fostering his son's musical education that when Franz was just 5 years old, he gifted Franz a piano to practice on, despite it costing twice as much as what he made in a whole year. Now, sadly, the house they were living in was so damp from poor insulation that within a few years, the wood in the piano keys expanded, which caused the entire keyboard to bind together like a big block of wood, making the instrument unplayable.
That sucks.
But Adam Liszt refused to keep his son from practicing and sold his most prized possession, his gold pocket watch, in order to pay for a new piano. So 2 pianos he paid for this kid just to help him keep practicing.
Wow.
It's amazing.
At this time, this is when the piano becomes really popular as like a production item, and lots of houses at this time would have them. So
we'll get there, and we'll talk about why that happened too.
Oh, really?
Yes. As of right now, it's musical instruments. There were obviously many makers that were making them, but you also have to remember that it was a fairly elitist thing at this point.
Oh, was it?
To play music. Yeah, unless you were,
I think my timeline might be off. I was thinking probably like 1850s later on.
Yeah, so this is the early 1800s. He was born in 1811. So by this point, we're in like 14, 18, 15, something like that. He's a little kid. So yeah, musical instruments were not only expensive, but they were fairly elitist at this point because you kind of had to have money to get your kid to play it.
Yeah.
Or even you to be able to play it. It wasn't something that poor people could do. Now, this wasn't just hubris on Adam's part. He knew his son was gifted, as by the age of 7, Franz was playing the piano at a higher level than his own father, spontaneously busting out pieces that he had memorized or straight up improvising a full piece of music that he made up on the spot. Adam Liszt recognized that there was little more he could teach him, so he started making plans to move the family to Vienna, Austria. However, living in Vienna, in addition to covering the costs for Franz's musical lessons, would be extremely expensive. Adam's employer, Prince Nicholas II, took some convincing, but eventually allowed Adam to take a year-long hiatus from his bookkeeping duties in order to take Franz to the music capital of Europe. Prior to leaving for Vienna, in order to raise some extra cash, the now 8-year-old Franz gave a music recital at a party hosted by some local hoity-toities. His performance was apparently so incredible that 2 days later, the local newspaper, the Pressburger Zeitung, ran a front-page story, that's what it's called, the Pressburger Zeitung, ran a front-page story praising the young prodigy, saying, quote, "The artist's extraordinary dexterity, together with speed and skill, which he brought to bear when performing, gave rise to universal admiration and justifies the highest hopes for his future."
That's like the nicest thing. Yeah.
It's very, very
that's
nice.
great.
And that's my best German accent, which you will be hearing a couple times throughout the series.
Is that your best? No, I'm just kidding.
Go to hell. Now, in fact, the social elites at the party were so impressed, they collectively agreed to support Franz's continued musical education by gifting him 600 florins per year for the next 6 years, which was 3 times what Adam Liszt's annual salary was and converts to about $8,700 in today's currency.
Florins?
Florins.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Don't ask me how the currency all worked. This was at that weird point in European history where there was so much land movement and territory movement that it was like, who's in charge of what money is coming from where? Anyhow.
Interesting.
Now, in the summer of 1822, the Liszt family arrived in Vienna, and the 10-year-old Franz started taking lessons from a man named Carl Czerny, who had previously studied with Ludwig von Beethoven and Antonio Salieri. Now, if the name Antonio Salieri sounds familiar, that's because he was the antagonist portrayed by actor F. Murray Abraham in the 1984 film Amadeus.
Very good film, but...
And bear with me, just for a few minutes here, we're going to talk more about him in just a second. Now, for any classical music fans out there, your ears probably just rung when I said the name Carl Czerny, as he is still a fairly popular figure in the world of classical music, and his methods of teaching piano are still used to this day. So if anybody's ever taken piano lessons, you almost definitely have gone through what they call the Czerny method of playing piano. He invented all kinds of mechanics in how piano playing works.
I see.
Now, Czerny later wrote of the young Franz, quote, "He was a pale, sickly-looking child who, while playing, swayed about on the stool as if drunk. His playing was irregular, untidy, confused, and he threw his fingers quite arbitrarily all over the keyboard. But that notwithstanding, I was astonished at the talent nature had bestowed upon him. Without the slightest knowledge of harmony, he brought a touch of genius to his playing." Remember, this is a seasoned, well-respected, and famous piano player calling a 10-year-old child a genius.
That's wild. He was like, he's kind of sickly, and the way he moves is really weird, but boy, can he play piano.
But holy crap, yeah, he's pretty amazing here. So the little genius Franz started learning piano mechanics under Czerny, who emphasized the importance of repetition and the building of muscle memory. Simply put, his musical workout regimen wasn't meant to be fun, but it did get you into shape as a musician. Apparently, many students in the past found his method so boring that a large portion were known to quit playing piano altogether after just a few months of working under his guidance.
That makes sense. I tried to learn piano when I was very, very little, and I'm quite certain that's what got me out of that too.
And it's almost definitely because of the Czerny method that you were learning, dude.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's like, it works, but you're not going to like it. There's a lot of that in music.
That's why I say, for anybody that's ever tried to play piano and like formally tried to train at it, almost definitely the way that they teach you, at least formally for a really long time, was this Czerny method. So if it ever felt grueling, That was kind of the point.
It was like
getting you into shape.
Yeah, when I was first taking opera classes, it was very similar. We sang probably once at the end of the semester. It was all pretty much every day was just how to breathe and how to go properly. And that was like it for like an entire semester. And then we have like our final was just like 30 seconds of one song.
Yeah, totally. Now, thankfully, this wasn't the case for Franz, who patiently and painstakingly worked through the Czerny method. Of Franz, Czerny would later say, quote, "I never had such an eager, inspired, and hard-working pupil." So he's a good student.
Yeah.
Now, Franz really did love to play the piano, and even more, he was a joy to be around. Even as a young boy, everyone talked about his cheerfulness, his good nature, and his great sense of humor. And Carl Czerny even talked about seeing him as a little brother he never had. Franz would hold deep love and respect for Carl for the remainder of his life and tried his best to stay in touch, though fame would later make his letters less frequent than he would have liked. Some 8 years after leaving his instruction, Franz would write to Carl Czerny saying, quote, "When I think of all the immense obligations under which I am placed towards you, and at the same time consider how long I have left you without a sign of remembrance, I am perfectly ashamed and miserable. I owe you both my talents and my success. At these words, a tear starts to my eyes, and I assure you that no repentant tear was ever more sincere."
Very intense.
Very intense.
This person must have meant a lot to Franz.
And I said this to you before we started recording here, but that little phrase that I just read, "when I think of the immense obligations under which I am placed towards you," remember, this is a kid that skipped most school. And he's writing like this. I don't know where this came from because he never really had a formal education outside of his music.
His father was a bookkeeper, right?
He was, and that might have been it. I know that he was a very avid reader, so I can only imagine that was a big part of how Franz was able to develop this way of writing. But man, I've read through so many of his letters and essays that he did over the years, and it's poetic
Beautiful.
how he writes. It's unbelievable.
Kind of reminds me of like Leonardo with not understanding Latin.
Yeah, very, very similar. And again, remember, he's writing this in like 4 different languages, depending on who he's writing to. It's crazy. Now, though Czerny was an incredible instructor in his own right, Franz needed more than mechanical training on the piano if he was to be a truly well-rounded musician. He needed to understand music theory and harmony. For this, Franz would study under the guidance of Antonio Salieri. A quick sidebar. I mentioned a minute ago that Salieri was portrayed as the antagonist in the 1984 film Amadeus. Now, first of all, sorry to disappoint all of you, but Amadeus is a horribly inaccurate movie, and Salieri was unfairly maligned as the architect of Mozart's ultimate demise. This is all nonsense. While there is historical evidence to suggest that a small rivalry existed between Salieri and Mozart, there is also evidence that both men were active supporters of one another's work, and there were even times that the two worked together to create joint compositions. In one of Mozart's final letters before he died, he even spoke of Salieri attending a performance of the Magic Flute, and how Salieri was among the loudest fans, shouting "Bravo" and "Bello" at the end of each piece.
Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
After Mozart's death in 1791, Salieri even gave piano lessons to several of Mozart's children for free. Now, I love the movie Amadeus, but to everyone out there, just know it is mostly fiction.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
I know. Now, Franz, at the insistence of his father, began to work with Salieri, who was widely considered to be the best piano teacher alive, and had previously given lessons to Ludwig van Beethoven, Franz Schubert, and even Mozart's children, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, in particular, Franz Mozart, who was the 6th child of Mozart. Now, after working with young Franz Liszt for a time, Salieri was so impressed that he had Franz write up a musical composition of his own to be entered into a music writing competition. Though he didn't win, at just 11 years old, Franz Liszt had managed to get his very first musical composition published. Because Salieri was so amazed with Franz's abilities, he gave him piano lessons free of charge. And when Salieri learned that Franz was forced to walk some 5 miles into town to take lessons, Salieri wrote to the Prince of Austria asking for help, and arranged for the Liszt family to be relocated into the heart of Vienna.
Wow, that's so cool. Just getting the red carpet treatment just on merits alone.
And by all accounts, from all that I've read, Salieri was a really good dude. So again, it makes me kind of like doubly upset about
he's so
Amadeus.
bitter in Amadeus. He's so bitter. That's wild.
Yeah, and he's I mean, the movie starts out with him like saying, "Forgive me, Mozart, for all I've done to betray you," or whatever. And it's like, nah, by all accounts, he was actually like a great dude. It makes me sad. Yeah. Anyway.
Giving Mozart's kids lessons. That's wild.
Now, quick question for you, Akiva. Have you ever noticed that it's just like a thing throughout the Western world that people have a piano in their homes, but they never play it? Any ideas why that is?
I think I understand something about it. I know that in the 1850s with like the Industrial Revolution, it was cheaper to buy instruments, but I'm not necessarily certain about like the motivations. Like I know that people liked music and there obviously wasn't radio and pianos became cheaper, but that's kind of the long and short of it.
Well, let me tell you about it a little bit. I was curious if you had any guesses or anything like that.
That's all I know about it from what I remember from music history.
Well, prior to about 1819, it wasn't really a thing. So let's talk for just a moment about the growing culture of teaching children music and specifically the 1819 introduction of the Carlsbad Decrees. See, after the defeat of Napoleon's forces at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, there was a growing sentiment throughout the Germanic Confederation for a unified Germany. The heads of the various states didn't want this to happen, mostly because they wanted to maintain their power, so they issued a series of decrees mostly aimed to keep the people ignorant and in line. They ordered that the press be silenced, liberal university professors be fired, and pushed hard on the idea of focusing inward and on one's family. Basically, they wanted the people of the Germanic Confederation to bury their heads in the sand when it came to politics and instead focus on the family.
Oh, I'm not going to get into it, but that sounds familiar.
Now, this resulted in something of an in-home revolution, where the heads of families began emphasizing to their children all forms of art, like literature, poetry, visual arts, and music. Because so many children were now more or less being forced to learn music, the industry for making musical instruments skyrocketed. And the piano became easily among the top 5 most popular. Before you knew it, households across Europe were adding pianos to their living rooms, which in turn led to the piano becoming a symbol of status. Not just wealth, but of personal value and cultural sophistication.
It's like when you walk into a house and they have the leather-bound encyclopedia on the wall, and you're like, "Oh, this person must be smart." And the guy who owns it's like, "I've never read these," but
that is a perfect comparison. So if anyone out there has ever wondered why people always seem to have pianos in their home but never use them, this is where it came from. And in an odd way, it was a direct result of Napoleon Bonaparte.
That's so cool.
Isn't that completely insane?
It's just like how Napoleon was the direct result of the Mona Lisa getting stolen.
Oh yeah, this is why I love this show.
That's so cool.
We find these links to things that you would never imagine, you know? Now, Franz's father, Adam, saw this whole thing as an opportunity for Franz to put on private concerts in people's homes, not just as a business endeavor, but also as a way to advertise to the public just how special his son was. He figured, well, everyone has a piano in their house now. Might as well put Franz in front of them.
I'm just going to say at the dinner party, if I had like my kids running around and Franz and, what was his name? Adam
was
Liszt,
his dad.
Adam Liszt and Franz come in. I'm like, oh, God, not these fucking assholes again.
Because they're going to make your kids look crappy.
Look at my beautiful son. Oh, Franz, play something on the piano. And then I'd be like, well, my kid, he can draw.
Look at him with his blocks. He's doing good.
Look, he's gonna be an engineer. How Franz is like just completely whipping something off the dome.
Oh, and not even that. Like you have to imagine it imagine if you went to a piano recital at a concert hall in downtown LA on a Sunday night and everybody wore tuxedos. At about this age, Franz was already playing like that.
Yeah.
So you're at a dinner party and a kid sits down at the piano who's like 11, 12 years old and busts out piano in a way that you just go, dude, most professionals can't play this way.
Yeah.
That would be very frustrating as a parent.
That would just be like the look between like Shalana and I being like, ugh, we got to get out of here.
Now, finally, on December 1st, 1822, after years of practice, study, and private recitals, Franz Liszt made his public concert debut and performed a piece by Johann Hummel, in addition to a fully improvised piano piece of his own. Suffice it to say, Franz killed it. His abilities, and maybe most importantly, his personality, smacked the entire audience upside the head, and they were instantly taken with the adorable and brilliant child. For a more modern comparison, I would liken it to Stevie Wonder, who is even called Little Stevie Wonder for the first 2 years of his career, and even more modern, hate to do this, Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
And that first video of him playing drums on YouTube.
Yeah, I was just thinking that or Michael Jackson in some instances.
Oh, great call.
Because like normally when you have this savant musician as a kid, there tends to be a point where things actually become difficult and then they stop playing. I that was kind of me when I was a kid. I was very naturally talented, and then as soon as actual effort had to be put in, I kind of fizzled out as a musician. But like people like Michael Jackson, Franz Liszt, Stevie Wonder, they never had a point where things got too hard and they stopped. They just continued. That's awesome.
Correct. And he was absolutely of that variety. I think Michael Jackson is probably one of the best comparisons you could have drawn. And weirdly, I've just kind of taken that man out of my brain, for reasons we won't get into or whatever. And for there's still debate on it, but whatever. We're not going to go there. Now, a local reviewer who was in attendance at the concert described Franz as a young Hercules who had fallen from the clouds and wrote, quote, "For his age, this boy's achievements border on the incredible, and one is tempted to doubt the sheer physical possibility when one hears the young giant. This musical prodigy is said to be able to sight read everything placed before him, and even now to be without equal in his ability to play from a full score."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
It's intense, dude. Now, according to legend, in 1823, none other than Ludwig van Beethoven himself attended one of Franz's performances, and at its conclusion, Beethoven marched onto the stage and kissed Franz on the forehead. But sadly, this is almost definitely not true, as there is zero evidence to support the claim, and even more, by 1823, Beethoven was already completely deaf.
I was just about to say, the concert happened and then they were just like, Beethoven, it was really good. Get up.
Yeah, so even if it did happen, it probably, look, if it happened, if I can give some ounce of credit, it's like Beethoven was probably good enough that he was watching his fingers move on the keys and go, wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
But he couldn't hear a thing.
No.
So sorry, that almost definitely didn't happen. Most historians don't think that actually happened.
Yeah.
But regardless, Franz Liszt was now the talk of the town, and with Vienna being the music capital of Europe, at the time anyways, Franz's reputation was starting to spread across the entire continent. And remember, this would now make him just 12 years old.
Total savant. He had to have been like actually born like a savant, like a literal.
There's nothing else for it, right? There are kids that have started playing piano when they're 4 and they're not doing stuff like this. So yeah, he was one of the gifted people, Now, with his newfound reputation, Franz's father decided the time was right for a year-long concert tour of Europe, followed by a year-long study at the Conservatory of Music in Paris.
Was his dad getting like hand over fist, or was he just like really proud of his son? Was he like, oh, we're going to be rich,
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay. I was about to say. It's supposed to be like, like basketball players, like dads coming back into the fold being like, I'm so glad I taught you how to play. And they're like, I don't even know who you are.
We'll get there. Now, that being said, I'll really quickly say that Adam Liszt loved his son. Okay. It was not purely exploitative, but again, we'll get there in a few minutes here. Now, Franz didn't have much say in the matter, as he was just too young to make these kinds of decisions and was also too nice to protest. Franz's instructor, Carl Czerny, expressed serious concern regarding the upcoming tour of Europe, saying Franz was too young and needed more stability, but Adam Liszt ignored him and proceeded with his plans. Franz wanted to stay with his pseudo-brother Carl, but was devoted to his work as a pianist and went along with his father's orders. To be fair to Adam Liszt, he wasn't just out to exploit his son's talents. He really did love his son and wanted the best for him. But that being said, he did exploit his son's talents.
Okay, all right.
And was starting to formulate a business plan whereby he could use Franz and his musical abilities as the primary breadwinning means for the family.
Yeah, I was just to say, this is like a Billie Eilish situation or something like that.
Oh, I don't know enough about that situation.
Yeah, their parents are just complete, like, hippie whack jobs. This is just a fan theory, but, like, I am quite certain that the reason why Billie Eilish was touring at, like, 13, 14 years old was their parents were sort of like, they wanted to be in theater, they wanted to be in music.
Okay.
Didn't work out for them, and they're like, our kid's really good. We should, just for them, I don't know, maybe do, like, an international tour and put them on every radio station possible.
For them, though. For the college fund.
Literally for them.
Not for us in a mansion. Definitely not. Now, on September 20th of 1823, Franz, along with his mother and father, left Vienna and began a concert tour around Europe. Everywhere he went, the people loved him, and some even called him the new Mozart. Kings and queens were known to attend his concerts and would often personally greet him after his performances to shower him with praise and affection. Not only were his performances praiseworthy, but profitable. And after just a few months of the first tour, Adam Liszt was reporting profits close to 1,000 florins, converting to almost $15,000 in today's currency.
Wow.
Things were going very well financially, but when
like, hey Franz, just go get yourself a sandwich. It's on me.
Attaboy, here's a sandwich.
Anyway, go ahead.
So things were going very well financially, but when they finally arrived in Paris in December of 1823, they were befuddled to find that despite Franz's renown and clearly exceptional talent, the Paris Conservatory of Music had implemented a policy that refused to take on any student that was not a natural-born French citizen.
Ugh.
His parents were mad, but Franz was even more pissed and later wrote, quote, "What a thunderbolt! I trembled in every limb. My groans and lamentations were unceasing."
Very dramatic. This child is very dramatic.
And well-spoken. But amazingly, this didn't even matter. When they tried to solicit private lessons from any piano teacher in Paris, everyone that heard Franz play said there was nothing more they could teach him, and that his training was more or less complete. And remember, Franz was not yet 13 years old.
Jeez.
Now, despite being rejected by the Conservatory of Music in Paris, Franz did manage to make a key contact in the city that would drastically affect his playing style and set him on a new course of piano performance for the rest of his life. Coincidentally, the genius piano-making brothers Jean-Baptiste and Hérode Frère Sébastien, and I'm trying my best with French pronunciations here, had just finished perfecting a new innovation on the piano known as the double escapement action, which allowed the hammers of a piano to immediately return to their starting position after a key was struck.
I see.
Okay. So if anybody out there, and I know you know what I'm talking about, but it's like if you press down on a piano key, it'll go bong, and it'll basically spring backwards and return to its starting position, even if you hold down the keys, right? Prior to this, that did not exist.
Oh, so yeah, if you pressed down, then it would almost make a staccato note.
It would dunk.
And the hammer itself would dull the resonance of the string.
Correct.
Whereas now you can hold down a key and it'll allow it to resonate longer.
Correct.
And prevent the dampener from activating the string again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it basically meant that you had to really get good at making your fingers go up and down on the keys, because you wanted to be able to have the notes sound correct. So it was a lot more mechanical in how you had to actually play it.
Elongated notes. Was that not really super possible in previous pianos? It would make sense, because if you think of the compositions pre-1800s, everything is very staccato.
So you could. So a little bit of background there is that prior to the piano was the harpsichord. Okay.
Yeah.
And rather than a hammer striking on these strings, so it'd go boom. If anybody's ever heard a harpsichord, it kind of sounds like like it's almost like
any medieval music that you're thinking of, like fantasy medieval music, it's probably in there.
Yeah. If anybody's curious, go and look up what a harpsichord sounds like. But it's basically like a harp piano. And when you would press a key, it was more or less plucking a string.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, The reason it's called the piano is actually called the pianoforte. That's the real name of piano, and it means hard and soft, more or less. So you can play it very, very hard. You can also play it very, very, yeah. Akiva's winking at me. Oh my God. You can play it very, very loudly, maybe is a better way to say it. And I think actually that might be pianoforte might be loud and soft. But anyway, my Latin is not very good.
Yeah.
But that's basically the idea when the piano was invented, is they started using hammers instead of a plucking mechanism. And that allowed for, you could play it really loudly or very, very gently and very, very soft, which was not a thing before then. So you could do what was called sustain. There was the sustain pedal you could push down, and it would basically release the dampener from the strings. But you still, if you pressed a note, you'd have to release your finger from the key if you wanted it to really ring out.
I see.
Okay. What the double escapement action meant is that you could just slam your fingers down on the keys, hold them there with the sustain pedal, and it would still go doom.
Okay.
And ring out.
I hear.
Okay. So huge
that is a massive
innovation. Okay. Now, this might not seem like much despite all the stuff that I just explained, but it allowed for exponentially faster piano playing and much more control from the player. In fact, it's an innovation that still exists to this day in 99.99% of all pianos in the world.
Yeah.
It's just de facto standard, okay? When Franz first gave their new piano a try, the Sebastian brothers were so amazed that they immediately gave Franz free rein to try out any and all of their pianos to provide feedback. This led to the Sebastian brothers signing an exclusive instrument contract with Franz. This would be akin to Slash from Guns N' Roses signing with Gibson Guitars, Eric Clapton with Fender, or Keith Moon with Premier Drums.
Yeah, I was about to say this is like, I'm thinking like YouTuber and being like, this is sponsored by so-and-so piano makers.
But even more, it wasn't just like, oh yeah, I get a commission from this. This is like, no. When you play, we want our name to be front and center so that everybody knows you are playing a Sebastian piano.
I see.
Like, it's like, Slash from Guns N' Roses only plays
making
a Gibson
it
Les Paul.
iconic.
Right. And it's this very specific thing. Same thing with Eric Clapton. He almost exclusively uses Fender. I think it's almost never he doesn't use a Fender.
Yeah.
Same exact thing. It's like these companies went, okay, we want you to be literally the face of our instruments, because then people can look at you and go, oh, I want to sound like you, and buy our instrument. Yeah. So this is what happened to Franz when he was almost 13. Unbelievable.
Getting brand deals.
I know, dude. Now, within a month of arriving in Paris, Franz had performed an astounding 38 private concerts in 30 days. So that's more than 2 a day.
I was just about to say, the math ain't mathin'.
Yeah, more than 2 a day he was playing oftentimes.
Oh, this poor kid.
Now, Franz's father, Adam Liszt, was charging between 100 and 150 French francs per ticket, and the money rolled in easily. At the shows, guests would be asked to name a musical theme, to which Franz would then bust out a fully improvised piece based on the suggestion. So they'd be like, klezmer music. And he'd be like, and just fully do it. And they'd be like, romantic. And he'd be like, and they'd go, Mozart. And he'd go, oh, okay. And he would just play a fully improvised piece based on whatever they suggested.
It's almost like an improv show, but with music.
Almost like dueling pianos, but not as like jokey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's completely insane. Audiences were floored. By February of 1824, Franz was putting on performances that would earn 2,000 francs profit per show. That's about $22,000. Take home in 2024's currency.
Ugh.
A month later, Adam Liszt organized another concert for his son that would more than double that figure.
How much was Franz himself getting?
Nothing.
What?
Yeah.
Then the dad's an ass.
So, okay, yes, but you also have to...
It's like, I
hate to pull this card, but you have to remember historical context.
I don't know. Michelangelo was managed to convince Ghirlandaio or whoever who trained him to pay him a salary, and he was 14.
Okay. This is not to say that Franz didn't get anything. He stayed in luxury hotels, ate at great restaurants, was a part of the elite.
Got a pizza party during lunch breaks.
Got anything he wanted, right? It was really like he was kind of a spoiled kid, because you also have to think that it's like 12 or 13 years old. You're not going to be like, all right, buddy, here's your $10,000. Don't spend it all in one place. It's like, I mean,
true.
There's an element to it where you're like, you kind of do have to be the parent in the situation and be like, look, buddy, you can get what you want, but I'm going to be the money holder, right?
Yeah.
And, not to pull, again, a Michael Jackson card or whatever, but his dad was the manager and was setting up all the shows, was setting up all the concerts, was making all the contacts, was saying, you should play with these people. Hell, he gave up his job just to take him to Vienna to get him these lessons.
I mean,
so
who would want to be, why would you give up your job as a bookkeeper when instead you could make $20,000 because your kid plays piano 38 times in 30 days?
I'm just saying, he still worked.
I understand that the father was a kind-hearted and caring individual, but I will say some minus points here for not getting any money for working literally more than every day.
I agree with you. I agree. Now, even more than the money, the crowds at his shows were starting to go nuts. Before Franz even took the stage, people were screaming, shouting, and applauding. Franz was so insane on the piano that guests were known to burst out into spontaneous applause in the middle of his performance, which was almost unheard of at the time. Before long, people would just scream and shout throughout his entire performance, driven wild by the insane abilities of the young virtuoso. All I can think to compare it to is concert footage of fans going wild at Beatles concerts in the 1960s.
Yeah. That whole meme of like, the European mind or the medieval mind couldn't comprehend this. That's what they're doing right now. It's just like these people are not even really listening to music at all. And they're hearing one of the greatest musicians of their life and just emotionally cannot figure out what to do with their bodies or minds. So they're like, oh, great heavens.
Yes. And by the way, this is like not even comparable to what would eventually happen with his fans later on in life.
Yeah.
This is like set one. This is like, well, okay, yeah, we're going crazy here, but it's going to get turned up a lot
it's
more.
A couple applauds, a couple shouts,
Yeah, people, I mean, they were cheering and woo and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, it gets crazy. Now, one reporter at the time even wrote, quote, "I cannot help it. Since yesterday evening, I have become a believer in the transmigration of souls. I am convinced that the soul and spirit of Mozart have passed into the body of the young Liszt." Then added as a final note, quote, "He is a delightful child."
Wow.
Yeah. So he's just this like amazing, adorable, great musician,
really,
just bringing down the house.
This really is like a little Michael Jackson situation.
It really
All
is.
controversy aside, you have to see the comparison here,
Absolutely.
Totally.
Completely. One time, when Franz was performing with the Italian Opera Orchestra, which was widely considered to be the best orchestra in Europe, the entire orchestra became so entranced and blown away by his piano playing that the entire orchestra forgot what they were doing and stopped playing mid-performance in sheer amazement.
That's so cool.
Remember in Back to the Future when Marty McFly played his Johnny B. Good guitar solo to all the kids in the 50s and looked up to see they all stopped dancing and were just staring at him in disbelief? Yeah, Franz Liszt did that to the best orchestra of professional musicians in the world at the time, and he was just a kid.
Y'all aren't ready, but your kids are going to love this.
Honestly, that is straight up what happened, but it was to a professional orchestra. The best orchestra in the world went, wait, what? And all stopped just because they were like, how are you doing this?
Fucking kid.
Yes.
How? Yeah.
In 1824, Franz had made his way to England, performing for the Royal Society of Musicians in addition to a private concert for King George IV at Windsor Castle. By this time, Franz had started to become enamored with composing his own music, but critics were never quite as taken with it compared to his live performances. He would practice piano 2 hours a day, spend 1 hour reading, and then spend the rest of his time writing compositions. Things went on like this for several years, with Franz and his father traveling all around Europe for performances, while his mother went to live with her sister in Austria. Around this time, probably spurred on by puberty, Franz really started to struggle with the demands placed on him by his father. He started keeping a log of all his prayers and thoughts in regards to what he believed he should be doing and thinking. In one entry in 1826, he wrote, quote, "Make sure that all your thoughts, words, and deeds satisfy your father and that they are a constant prayer to him. God orders you to honor your parents. Gratitude demands it.
Oh, bud.
The word father, by the way, in that quote was not capitalized, meaning he was referring to his actual dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It just like reminds me of just like the overbearing parent who like wants you to be the doctor or the lawyer or something like that. And you're like, but you gotta, like, you know, growing up with like immigrant parents, they always, my parents were pretty good about this, but a lot of them were just like, you know, I came home, came to the United States on a raft so I could give you an education. And like,
kind of, yeah.
There's this part where you grow up with just like so much gratitude. Like his father gave up his job and became his manager so he could pursue his dream. And he's just like, man, you have to like constantly remind yourself, despite your frustrations with them, of like, I know what they gave up for me. I know I have to make them proud. And that can be like so much pressure on a kid, especially a kid, hitting puberty now as a superstar playing for Kings.
I know. Now, seemingly in opposition to all that his dad had done for him, Franz started to get an idea in his head that he should one day become a priest and give up all this music stuff. Now, I'm not exactly sure why he started to think about becoming a priest, but I'm willing to bet that it was around this time that Franz first lost his virginity. He would be almost 15 by this point, which in those days meant you were now a man. And Franz was undoubtedly being pursued by loads of young women, not only because he was a popular musician, but remember, he was also quite the looker too.
Mm-hmm.
So my guess is that a groupie popped his cherry, and all the fire and brimstone sermons he was constantly hearing were giving him a guilty conscience, which in turn made him consider joining the priesthood.
Wow, history is just people plus time, because like I just like remember that time when you're young and you're just like, I'm gonna go work for the Peace Corps, and I'm just such an evil person. I have to do something to counterbalance my evil sin. I can't believe I did it.
Yeah, I definitely think. And by the way, I haven't been able to find anything to back this up. Just me putting the pieces together on this, that is just my personal theory.
Yeah.
So I don't know that for sure, but it's what it sort of seems like to me, because it starts to kind of come out of nowhere.
Yeah. And if anything, it could also just be like impure thoughts begin to happen at that time, stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah, him having too many
you're like
thoughts
thinking
of
about
lust
boobs,
and stuff.
But then you're also thinking about how like Jesus is with you everywhere you go, and now Jesus knows that you're thinking about boobs, and now you should probably become a priest about that.
Right. So he's like, he's letting everyone down. So he's like, oh, this music is bringing me to a bad place. Maybe I should become a priest. Like,
yeah,
I just tend to think that was what was kind of happening.
Guilt.
Yeah. Now, I also have a feeling that Adam Liszt was starting to see what was going on with all of Franz's groupies. So in response to the notion of him joining the priesthood, his father said, quote, "The fact that you may love something is no guarantee of your calling for it. But you have a calling for music. You belong to art, not the church." Kind of metal.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was like, that's pretty cool. Now, his father's words seemed to stick for the most part, as Franz soon abandoned the notion of joining the priesthood. Regardless, for the rest of his life, Franz felt a compulsion towards the Catholic faith. Now, for the past 5 years, Franz and his father Adam had spent nearly every day together, traveling throughout Europe and putting on concerts. They had formed a tight bond, despite Franz wishing he had a bit more freedom. In August of 1827, after months of endless concert touring, they decided it was high time for a vacation and headed to the town of Boulogne-sur-Mer in northern France. The two arrived in good spirits, but for the past few days, Adam Liszt had been feeling under the weather. About a week into their vacation, Adam's sickness had worsened significantly, which prompted Franz to write a letter to his mother Anna, explaining the situation. In the letter, Franz wrote, quote, "As I write these lines, I am much afraid for my father's health. Father begs you not to lose heart. He is very ill, and that's why he wants me to tell you in this letter that you may perhaps have to come to France, but he thinks we should wait a few more days." Now, we don't quite know what illness Adam Liszt was suffering from. Some speculate it being typhoid fever. But whatever sickness Adam Liszt had contracted, he knew he was dying. Adam's final words to Franz before he was too weak to speak were, quote, "You have a good heart and do not lack intelligence, but be cautious that women might confuse and rule you." He passed away on August 28th, 1827. The man who had been at Franz's side nearly every day of his life and who had helped him in so many ways to help foster his genius was now gone. Franz was just 15 years old. Though he didn't know it at the time, his father's words of caution regarding the lady folk were incredibly well-founded, as Franz would soon find himself of the right age, wink wink, and with hordes of women seeking his affection. And that's where we'll pick back up for part 2 of Franz Liszt.
Oh. Man, that thrill of the first episode of a new biography, it's just, there's nothing like it. I'm
fun.
So excited. Once again, one of those characters, when you hear about him, oh, he's a piano player, composer, it just sounds so stuffy. But
agreed.
We've talked about this so many times. Everyone likes history. You just have to find what about history you like. You like video games? There's video game history. You like interpersonal drama. History is chock full of that. And with somebody like Liszt, if you read it from a music textbook, I'm sure you would find him quite boring. But if you know about the ins and outs of his life, like the fact that his dad was like his manager and there was like some seedy stuff there, but overall he loved him and no person's perfect. And now, he's feeling all these feelings about ladies because he's like really like hitting puberty. The hormones are kicking in and his dad's like, yo, watch out for the ladies. And he's totally going to ignore that advice.
Yeah.
That's so much more enticing, and history is just so much more enticing than people really give it credit for.
Dude, could not agree with you more. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to do Franz Liszt so bad. It's really funny because even, this is a while back, but I was talking to my parents about it and they were kind of saying, well, who are you thinking about doing next? And my dad, who, since I can remember, has been a classical music guy. Right. Mm-hmm. He would I remember driving in his like pickup truck and him blasting classical music. And he would do it. And, he's trying to be funny or whatever, where like a dude would pull up next to us like bumping rap music and he would crank the classical, you know what I mean?
That's funny.
But that was him. That was like his whole thing was he loved classical music. And I remember saying, well, a person that I've been really thinking about doing is Franz Liszt. Even he went, really? Because I'll be honest, that doesn't really excite me. And I was like, okay, but I'm telling you, like, this
Listen,
dude,
and you'll find out.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is some crazy, crazy stuff. And by the way, we are just getting cooking.
I know.
Like, where we're going from here, I mean, I said it in the intro where I was like, this guy's Rockstar story would rival any of your favorite musicians from the past 100 years. And I am not exaggerating. Like, we're going to be getting into so many bits of drama and juicy gossip
drama.
And
I'm so excited.
I mean, there's everything. I don't want to give it anything away, but there's so many things that you're just going to be like, wait, what? Wait, who? That? No way. Like,
yeah, it was like when I was like, my sister always jokes that, history is very boring. And like when we shared a bunk bed, she would always joke that whenever I would just rant about history to her, it would help her fall asleep. Right.
Yeah.
But on the drive here, I was telling her about the drama between Michelangelo and Leonardo. And I was like, and he said, and then he said, and he painted the Battle of Cascino. But really, it was all just a bunch of naked dudes because he wasn't, accepting of his inner self and da-da-da-da. And I could feel Gavi just like kind of forget that I was not talking about people that I know. And that's what I want to everyone out there. History is literally everything plus time.
Yes, I completely agree. And
anything
actually,
you can think of has happened.
You saying that exact thing reminded me is we had somebody comment on one of our podcasts that was on YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. I think I had sent it to you where he said, I put on your podcast to try to fall asleep. And he was like, and it's like 3 hours later and I've gotten through like 4 of your episodes. I can't stop. And it was like, yes, mission accomplished.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you're listening, hello.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. We appreciate you. But yeah, so I'm glad you're enjoying this so far, man. This has been.
I'm so jazzed.
I know, and I'm hopefully I'm leaving you at a point where you're like, no. It's just getting going.
His dad died. The manager, the one raking in all the big bucks.
I will also add this. This is a fun fact that I did not add to the script because I was just like, I'm trying to save time and everything like that. But I'll throw it in really quickly. Is that do remember that throughout this entire time when Franz and his father were traveling all around Europe putting on these concerts, trains were not a thing.
Oh, there's still horse and buggy?
This was all carriage rides. So all they're doing
must suck so bad
is riding around in these carriages to get there. And the thing that I like kind of looked into and went, okay, well, that's just a fun trivia fact. Okay. And I've already kind of played the hand. But when you fly on an airplane, why do they call it coach? Because all the people back in the day that couldn't afford to ride in the carriage would ride up with the coach. On the outside of the carriage. So that's the coach driver. They'd be sitting on the coach where their seat was, their little bench seat, and they'd be, saying "Waha" to the horses or whatever. Yeah. That's where, so carriages, what's up?
I was also just thinking the word couch. Is there an association there? Because if you look at the seat of a coach, like horse and buggy, I wonder if that has any, anyway, that's a
no
totally
idea.
left field thing. Anyway.
That I don't know about. But yeah, I thought that was actually a really fascinating little thing.
Totally.
Is that, so more or less, Franz and his father were always riding first class inside of the carriage, and all the people that couldn't afford that were riding coach.
I see.
And when we got to the world of airplanes, it just continued on in that sort of tradition is, well, that's the lesser seating. We're going to call that coach.
Yeah, it's like how riding shotgun was like in World War II. That was the guy with the shotgun on the Jeeps.
Yeah.
So now the second seat is shotgun.
That's cool. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Well, right on. I guess we'll wrap it up here. We'll give a little shout out again to our Patreon if anybody is able to support us. I do hope you're enjoying the series so far, episode 1. But again, all of the series that we've done previously, Leonardo and
Ian Fleming,
Mabel, everybody. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. And if you want to give us a little bit of support, we'd really, really appreciate it. It's going to be patreon.com/thebiographers. And I also said at the beginning of the episode, but we are starting a Kickstarter. I'm thinking it'll be launching right around like August 19th. So keep an eye out for that. That's just going to be kickstarter.com/profile/thebiographers. Pretty easy there. Also go check out Metalwork by Miola.
Yes, please do.
Always give a shout out to Akiva's site.
Taking custom commissions. I don't have a whole lot in inventory right now, but I'm hoping to add a couple things in the future. If it's Damascus or anything really out of steel, whether it's gates, railings, jewelry, hand-forged knives, I can make it.
Sweet. So. Yeah, go check that out. Metalwork by Miola. That's spelled MEOLA.com. You can use the code biographers at checkout to get 10% off of your order. You can also find us on social media. We're going to be on TikTok. We're going to be on YouTube. We're going to be on Instagram. It's almost always just going to be at the biographers, except for Instagram, which is at the.biographers. Beyond that, any questions, comments, corrections, you can shoot us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. Anything else?
Nah, man, I'm just stoked to hear the next episode.
I'm excited to get into it. Like I said, I mean, hopefully episode 1 was like we're setting the stage for this crazy, prodigious child doing all this crazy stuff.
Totally.
And now we're going to get into, next episode, I'll just say it now, we're going to get to some name dropping that you're going to be like, wait, really? That person? Like, it's that kind of stuff. It's pretty darn cool. So tune in for episode 2. That's going to be out a week after this, obviously. But we'll end it there. And as I always like to say, remember, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I hope you all learned something today.
See ya.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.